With the Senior Bowl right around the corner, we had to bring in one of the very best to do it. Dom C is going to join me on the other side to discuss all things Senior Bowl. It's the DTereman Football Show, and it starts right now.
Not only have to understand how to win, but to understand how to consistently win.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome into another episode of the Believe in Jets podcast. I am your host, DTereman, where tonight we will be joined by one of the best in the draft business, and it's just so happens that he's a Jets fan, so his opinions weigh twice as much, and it also happens that we will be sharing an Airbnb in just a few short weeks in Mobile. Let's bring on everybody's favorite Jets draft analyst, Dom C of Project Prospect and Jets X Factor. Dom, thank you so much for joining, and just 10, 11, 12 days out from Senior Bowl. I'm super excited, man.
Yeah, DT, it's getting there. I'm super stoked. Been watching the weather. Always get like super anal about the weather right now. Not so much like what am I gonna pack? Am I gonna bring shorts? Should I bring pants? It's more so like, oh God, I hope it doesn't rain. And I hope we don't get rained out for a practice, so on and so forth, because you only get, it's like 3 days of just like jam-packed action all in one. And it's always a good time. It's always a fun time. So I'm looking forward to it, man.
Yeah, the rain is really the only thing that brings me down with the Senior Bowl. I remember 2022, the Thursday practice was to inside media only in the small training facility. So everybody had to hightail out of Mobile a little bit early and change their flight plans, which made it quite hectic. So yeah, I'm hoping for good weather. I'm ready to dive right in. So how we're going to do this is we'll do offense first, and we will talk about a couple positions that we like, and then we'll talk about some players that we also think the Jets should be looking at those positions. So I'll give you the floor. Give me your top 2, maybe 3 positions on offense that you really like when the Senior Bowl roster was just announced a couple days ago.
So I'll preface by saying this. On the offensive side, I think it's not packing as much firepower as it has in years past. And one reason is I think that the East-West Shrine Bowl has done a really good job recruiting this year. Like they took a lot of the talent. On top of it, it's also listen, let's call it what it is, DT. If you put this entire draft class up against some draft class of, the past few years, it's probably on the lower end, right? You're never going to get the top dogs, but we've seen some top dogs in the past couple of years, right? Talise Fuonga was there a couple years ago. On top of that's just one high end first round pick that I can remember. I'm sure there was tons and tons more, but the class itself isn't that strong. I am looking forward to seeing some of these wide receivers. Some of these wide receivers are, a couple of these guys that are going to be here are guys that I really liked over over my eval time this past season and in season past. I think the tight end group is really, really underrated. I don't know if you're going to, there's a couple high flyers in there, some guys that are, kind of your big slots and your true Fs and stuff like that, that are going to go out and be able to, bust the seam and get out there, be more catch, dominant as opposed to all around or block dominant. They had Harold Fad in there last year, guys in that same mold. So I think that the tight ends are a group that I'm going to be really, really observing. And then there's quarterbacks, right? It's funny. There's no huge names. I guess Garrett Nussmeier would be. I mean, he's definitely my highest rated quarterback that's going to attend, and it's probably the biggest name of them all, but there's definitely some fun guys there in the quarterback room. So there is, Taylor Green from Arkansas is a fun study. Cole Payton, an even better study. There's going to be a lot of who else is there? Sawyer Robertson, from Baylor, who I think is arguably one of the best pure pocket passers in the league. So or in college football. So I think there's going to be some good competition there. I happen to feel like those are probably the three that are going to catch my eye the most. And it also goes to say how again, my opinion only. I think it's a little bit of a down year in the offensive line group. So, there's no big names, and even the bigger names aren't really up to snuff or at the same level of play or caliber of the offensive linemen that we've seen coming out the past few years. So I'm happy to go and see some of these quarterbacks fling it around and see what kind of receiving chops these tight ends and receivers have.
Yeah, so we'll start right there with the quarterbacks because all eyes are certainly on the position as Jets fans specifically. And like you said, the talent doesn't necessarily match up to years past. And just as a whole, you talked about the draft class being, I guess, weaker, we'll call it. ESPN only has 11 players right now graded with first-round picks. I believe one of those was Dante Moore. So now you're looking at a 10-player first-round grade draft. Yeah. So obviously 22 players are going to go in the first round without a first round grade, according to ESPN. So none of the
I had 15 myself. I had 16, but Amari Washington, it's actually 17 because Dante Moore I had a first round grade on as well. So I'm down to 15, which is a little bit lower. Last year I think I had 18 or 19, and the year before I had even more than that. So I mean, teach their own. 32 guys are going to get taken in the first round regardless. So.
Yes, exactly. And I don't believe any of these quarterbacks will get drafted in the first 32 picks. No. Although you hit on the guy who you said is your highest rated, Garrett Nussmeier. Yeah. He's really the only one I'm keeping my eye on in terms of where could the Jets possibly get him. Obviously, we have 2 second-round picks, so I feel like that would be the absolute ceiling, and he would really have to come in and prove that he could undergo some NFL level coaching, really have a bounce back year. I know he was benched. I believe some of it was injury. Some of it might've been performance as well down the stretch at LSU. So all eyes to me are going to be on Nussmeier. And I guess my dark horse would be Luke Altmaier. So the two Myers really. And I know Illinois isn't like necessarily a smaller school, but I feel like he has almost no hype going into this, except for maybe a couple draft analysts I know that like to joke and call him Goatmeyer. And then Sawyer Robinson to me would be the third guy that I'm eyeing. So from a Jets perspective specifically, where would you like to see some of these guys show out and perhaps improve their stock, or where do you see them right now?
Well, let's talk about Nussmeier first, because, I think that there's a lot to unpack in what happened with him in LSU this year. Going into it, he was arguably in the top 3 of all the prospects going into summer scouting this year from a multitude of different people. There's some people that didn't like him, too small, doesn't have and doesn't do anything at an elite level, this, that, the other thing. I pushed back a little bit on that. I thought he was really good last year. And I'm talking the season of 24. I thought he was really good. I thought that he showed that he's got really good arm talent. He could push the ball vertically. You saw a quick processor in the sense that he understood what he was looking at pre-snap, could get through his reads. I don't know if he had the best pocket presence and the best feel in the pocket, which also always led to those bonehead mistakes that he made in the 2024 season. But the glimpses of something really, really special was there. Now I don't know how big he's going to measure out. That's the thing. He very well may come in at pushing right at about 6 foot tall, 200 pounds, and that's just not going to be everyone's cup of tea. He can move. He's functionally athletic. I don't want to call him mobile in the least. I think he's more functional athletic, and he's definitely tough. Like, he'll step in and he'll in the face of pressure, like, he's not he doesn't cower down or shy away from it. It might cause him in past to make some stupid decisions. But coming into this year, I think that he had, a phenomenal game open up the season against Clemson, and then the bottom just fell out on LSU and the coaching, and he played a little hurt, and he lacked the ability. And I talk about this with him. I talk about this with Klubnik as well. Is you hoped that you kind of picked up where you left off, cleaned up some of that mistake stuff, and took that next step. And neither of them showed that they did that, and neither of them showed that they were able to carry their respective offenses on their back. They kind of almost played down to the level of the team.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Garrett Nussmeier has, in a Jets, kind of in a Jets tunnel, I think Garrett Nussmeier has the most upside of being a true starter,
Okay.
So I would probably say, for Jet purposes, I think that I'm most interested with him. And I definitely think he's he's a top 60, he's an late round 2, early round 3 grade for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have, let me see. He is my 65th ranked player in the class.
Mm-hmm.
So that's right in that cusp.
Yep.
Of late round 2, early round 3. I think he'll go in the second round. 44 might be a little rich, if we're talking the Jets here. But a team might say, listen, he's the kid, his dad's an offensive coordinator and a QB coach himself.
Mm-hmm.
He's got the bloodlines. You don't have to worry about his ability to play the game mentally. You just got to clean up some other stuff. You got to help him kind of, help that internal clock speed up. You got to kind of help him make better decisions, right? But because when he does really, really good things with that. Like he had, he had more big time throws this year than he had turnover worthy plays, and he lowered his pressure to sack rate, in the time that he started this year. So there's some steps in the right direction. It's not all there. Now, if you're talking day 3, like throw a dart, like I want to see some, I want to see some like talent. Man, I think Cole Payton's going to be a lot of fun for everyone to see. When you talk about like a true, like raw prospect that has dual threat ability, DT, Cole Payton's the guy. I mean, he's going to wow. You're going to hear it in the stands at the University of South Alabama, the oohs and the ahs, as he heaves the ball 60, 70 yards with the flick of a wrist. Like, he's got a cannon, dude. He's got an absolute cannon. He's built big. He's, every bit of 235, 240 pounds. And, he can affect the game with his legs. And he's not, although he's fast and he is definitely dual threat material, like, he will hurt an offense with his legs. He doesn't do it the way that maybe, Lamar Jackson did it or Randall Cunningham did it. He does it more Josh Allen. Like you're in my way. I'm going to run right through you. But 16 touchdowns and 4 interceptions this year. Again, he had 12 or 13 big time, flagged big time throws. Didn't put the ball in harm's way all that much. 1.6%, 1.6% pressure to sack rate, which is ridiculously good.
Phenomenal
considering where he played. You have to take it with a grain of salt. So he's not, he's understanding the assignment. And I think he's going to be a fun watch. Listen, he's an older prospect with not a lot of starts. I don't think you're going to see anyone plug him on day 1 or day 2. But if you want to take a guy, if you're in a sense that you just want to throw your Zach Kuntz kind of dart throw pick at a guy, Cole Payton, you could do a lot worse. Like he gets with the right guys and he gets with the right coach, and they can kind of help him along on the mental side of how to really play quarterback. Like he's just a hair late on things, doesn't get through his full progressions, a lot of half field reads, a lot of go routes from his receivers, all that stuff. So I think that, I think it'll be a lot of fun.
So transitioning from the person throwing the ball to the people that they will be throwing to, you mentioned both wide receiver and tight end. Obviously, the Jets roster has a ton of needs, a ton of holes in the boat that need to be filled. I could see one from each of these categories being selected in the draft. Talk us through some of the wide receivers that you like. I personally did a study already on Jacoby Lane. Shout out the Trojans.
Yeah.
And I also really like Deion Burks from Oklahoma
Yeah.
as a big John Mateer studier. Casey Concepcion in Texas A&M. And then I really also like Elijah Surratt. I don't think he'll end up going to the Senior Bowl and participating because he's in the Natty. But talk me through some of the top guys on your wide receiver board going down to Mobile.
Yeah. So, Casey Concepcion and Elijah Surratt would be my two highest rated receivers. I totally agree. I'm sure we're not going to see Surratt down there, unfortunately. And Concepcion's an interesting receiver. Like, he can do a lot. Like he's gonna get drafted very high. I think he's gonna come in right away and he's going to help a team out on punt returns, on kick returns. I think he can, come in and immediately play like as that slot receiver. The reality is that teams are getting away from those smaller, undersized slot receivers these days. That we know that we learn to love growing up. Some teams still use them, very, very heavily, but you see bigger slots going out there now, right? You see, maybe he's not the biggest, but Amon-Ra St. Brown is typical Puka Nacua. You get these guys that, even some of these teams that'll run the stretch tight ends as the slots, the Evan Ingrams of the world. So those little kind of, jitterbug guys, they're few and far between. I think Concepcion is one of those. I think that there's going to be a role in a horizontal flowing West Coast style offense is what he can do. And the yards after the catch that he can offer is ridiculous. For a little guy, he had a contested catch rate over 67, which is wonderful. And you put the ball in his hand and he's a true playmaker. Problem is, he's definitely got to return. He's definitely got to fix some of those dropsy issues that he's had over the past couple of years. So yeah, Concepcion's going to be interesting. I think the Senior Bowl is a place that he is going to shine. Like you give those guys, those quick jitterbug guys, two-way reads and two-way routes, and they're gonna they're probably gonna be uncoverable. A couple guys that I do like that maybe are flying under the radar. One of them, Ted Hurst from Georgia State, smaller school kid, so not a lot of people have eyes on him, and I didn't either until when the invitations were coming out, and the invitations were coming out, and some of the guys that I hadn't got eyes on, I wanted to do some quick film study, and not many people have Georgia State film, flying all over the place, but
yeah,
he's a big dude. He's 6'3", 200 pounds. I think he's your prototypical boundary guy. He's your X guy, 1,000-yard receiver, about a 78% contested catch guy. And almost a 14 ADOT, average depth of target. So he's getting the ball, and he's making plays with it. Like he's making plays downfield. I just like the build. I like the reliable hands that he has. Less than a 3.4% drop rate all throughout his years in college. You watch him move. I love the way he sets up defenders. I love the way he sinks. His hips sink over his toes. He's got a varied release package. I think he's a guy that can just play football. Yes, he did it at a smaller school at Georgia State, but these are the kind of opportunities that guys, kind of excel at. And the other guy that I'm really looking forward to get my eyes on, and you made mention to him, in your John Mateer love, is Deion Burks. He's another guy who's probably more gadgety and specialty than anything. But man, can he move? Can he move, man? He is you put the ball in his hands and anything can happen. Anything can happen. Now, as Jets fans, we haven't had much luck with those gadgety guys, right?
Mhm.
We think of Malachi, Malachi, no matter what. And that one didn't work out. Deion Burks is even a little bit smaller than Malachi Corley. Deion Burks is going to probably push about 5'9", 182 pounds.
Mhm.
And obviously he's going, people are going to, kind of dovetail him to play in the slot, but I actually think he'd play a little Z. I think he can do, I think he can run, he's really fluid and really complete in his route tree and his route running capabilities, his ability to create separation with his quickness, and then his his footwork and the way that he runs routes. I think that he can run vertical routes, so he might be able to even play in the Z in some sets, but probably he's more of a vertical pressing Y who you just want to get the ball in his hands and let him do the do, right? He's a playmaker.
Yeah.
Man. He's an absolute playmaker, and he's a lot of fun. So I can't wait to see him when I'm down there.
Yeah, the person that I kind of liken him to, and I'm not one to like really dive into the comps, but I get a lot of Zay Flowers vibes from him, and maybe that's a little too high of expectations for somebody like Deion Burks. But the way that you were describing him too, he's not just the slot only.
Yeah.
You can put him on the boundary. You can do a lot of things with him. I don't want to say he's like a Romeo Doubs to me, but Romeo Doubs, I felt like going into the Senior Bowl was like a slot only guy coming out of Nevada, and he showed he could do boundary work too. So this might be the type of week for Deion Burks to prove, hey, like my size doesn't mean anything. I can be a boundary guy too and win with my route separation on maybe some comebacks and some vertical routes as well. So I'm really intrigued by Deion Burks. And like I said, studying John Mateer in the early season process before the hand injury, Deion Burks was one of his best targets. So I was really excited to see his name.
Yeah, I want to see him push through, and what I think is going to be important to watch for him is how he fares at the catch point with more physical guys who are at the top of their game at the Senior Bowl. That's the one thing that's beautiful about this process. These 3 days that we get is, we talk about it's the best of the best, but they compete, man. They're competing and they want to make each other better, and the iron sharpens iron, all that stuff, blah blah blah. But he's gonna get the line up against some of the best DBs in the country, and we're gonna see if he can hang and how physical he is, and how physical he is through the catch point, how strong those hands are. They better be, because he's not gonna outreach anybody. You know what I mean? That wingspan isn't gonna be bigger than most of these DBs, so he's gonna have to outmuscle them, or leave him in his dust, which should be interesting.
Absolutely.
And I know you talked about the tight end. I'll talk about one tight end who I really, really like. He's actually my third rated tight end in the class. And I was surprised because he was, again, another late study. But once I got into him, I was really, really excited. And you talk about, for the Jets, this is the perfect complement to what we have in Mason Taylor. And that's Justin Joly from North Carolina State. The UConn transfer, explosive athlete, right? Explosive athlete, 6'3.5", 250 pounds, straight line speed. Linebackers and safeties aren't going to be able to hang with him. He's an absolute seam splitter. He showed that off in college. He's a former wide receiver who just got bigger, right? So runs a complete route tree. Like the stuff that he can do, the footwork, the release packages that he has, his ability to create separation, is, for a tight end, is next worldly. It's as good, if not better, than Oronde Gadsden was in his last year at Syracuse. So, and if you remember Oronde Gadsden, I thought his ability to play receiver, or that slot receiver, was ridiculous in that last year at Syracuse. But Joly's got the footwork. He makes things happen after the catch, which is nice to see, yards after the catch, because Mason Taylor hasn't shown that that's really part of his repertoire. And this guy catches absolutely everything. 70% on his career on his contested catches, both at UConn and North Carolina State. He's a willing blocker. He'll get his hands, in there dirty. He's not going to do a lot of stuff, lined up tight. But man, when you talk about a perfect complement to what Mason Taylor is, I think you need to get what we thought we were getting in Stone Smart. And what we got in Stone Smart
Mhm.
was a guy who was fifth or second off the end of the line on punt return. Now let's get that true receiving weapon next to Mason Taylor. And I'm not saying Mason Taylor's not a good receiver. He is, but he's Justin Joly would be a different type, a complement to Mason Taylor. He's kind of more your stretch the field, vertical, take, make the defense, especially, at the second half of the defense, the corners playing in zone or the safeties, make them make decisions. That's just going to open up the stuff underneath for the Mason Taylor. So Justin Joly is a guy that I'm absolutely going to have my eyes on.
100%. And the guy that I was looking at was his teammate. I did a mock-off season where I took Tanner Koziel. So they'll be both on the national team, Joly and Koziel.
Yeah.
Highly productive player at Houston. I believe he transferred in from another school where he was also highly productive. Over 20 to 24 total touchdowns in his career. Over 73% contested catch, if I'm going off memory. So I was impressed for all the same reasons that you talked about Joly. So I'm going to be excited to see the national team in terms of both of those tight ends. So any thoughts on Tanner before we flip over to the defense?
No, I thought, listen, he's a mismatch nightmare. He is a true red zone threat. I mean, he's going to push 7, like 6'7". Okay. If not, he's going to be up there at 6'6.5", 6'7". So he's a 50-50 ball machine. He's a red zone threat. And he's got natural ball skills. I just don't know if he's as fluid of a mover as Joly is. Probably not as athletic. Definitely not as good of a route runner, but that's okay because I think you're going to be hard pressed to find a lot of tight ends. To find tight ends in this class that are as good as route runners as Justin Joly. So yeah, I think if you put some weight on, I think you might have something. I think like I said, and Kozel's my 7th rated tight end, so he's not too far off. I think that there's, I think I like him for a role, and I don't know how much that role sees the field. Right. I think he's probably your third tight end that you're going to put in certain situation, goal line packages, red zone packages, so on and so forth. Whereas Joly, I think, can find more of a 50-50 split. Maybe he'll never be tight end 1. Or maybe he turns in a career like, he develops and turns in a career like Evan Engram, where he's pretty much just a receiver playing slot.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind putting Jeremy Ruckert in the tight end 3 role if a guy like Joly was able to take over tight end 2. And like you said, if he's not necessarily tight end 1, you could still have him and Mason Taylor on the field at the same time. 12 personnel, 13 personnel. If you watch what the Rams do, it's really becoming a thing. So with that, we will turn it over to about 5 to 10 minutes worth of questions. I had some starred here, some that we did answer on the fly. This one, we'll do the super chats first. And then we'll go to Ricky, who was first in on the questions. First one is from Jake, $2 super chat. Death, taxes, and Dom C. It's that time, baby. Yeah, so the 3 of us will be down in Mobile together doing a lot of live content. So I'm really excited. Thank you, Jake, for the $2. I appreciate it. We have Tom Brady 7 rings. When you do your division lineup next year, put Drake May number 1. Yeah, that's probably how it's going to go. I appreciate that. Thank you for the $2.79 of Canadian currency to tell me that Drake May is number 1 in the division. And then we have Jersey Jet, my guy. I appreciate you with the $5 super chat. Like, share, and subscribe. Please do so. We are closing in on 1,400 subs. We're trying to get to 2,000, and then I will be doing some kind of giveaway for this excellent community. So the first one comes from Ricky, New York Live. He says, Dom, curious your thoughts on Keylan Rutledge. I believe he is the Georgia Tech offensive guard. I also mocked him in that same offseason as Tanner Koziel. So I have Keylan Rutledge a little bit of knowledge on. What do you have on the Georgia Tech guard?
He'll be at Senior Bowl, so I think we will be able to get eyes on him right away. He graded out as a 3rd round grade for me. He was a transfer, if I'm not mistaken. Ricky, you could correct me if I'm wrong. I think he started his career at Texas or Texas A&M, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember which one. But yeah, any scheme guard. I think that he's big enough. He's big enough to kind of last inside. I think at 6'4", 320, with a lot of the weight down below and solid anchor. I think he has the ability to last and be in pass protection. Really, really good. I think in Georgia Tech, he kind of showed some of that. He kind of, his anchor is next level. His anchor is really good. I'm just not sure how well he's going to play in space. Like for me, I would love it. I don't know if he does. This is just completely my, completely my kind of hopes or dreams. If I was if I was coach, but I would love to see him at center. Where he doesn't have to move, where he doesn't have to move all that much, right? Kind of just plant down and kind of anchor down and just move people in the phone booth. The foot speed's a little bit questionable at times. I think he looks a little bit clunky in space. Like I don't know how fluid of an athlete he is. But he's strong as hell. He's strong as hell. And listen, Georgia Tech had a great. They had one of the nation's best rushing attacks. So, he did his job. They also, were I think they were the best, maybe one of the nation's best, or maybe they're just the ACC's best in fewest sacks allowed. So, Keylan Rutledge graded out as a third round grade for me. I think I don't know how much he'd fit what Tanner wants to do. I think you're probably looking for a guy. Not necessarily lighter, but a little bit more agile, or has the ability to really get into the second level and play outside zone a little bit more. I don't know if that's Rutledge. So
yeah. So the notes that I do have on Rutledge, he transferred over from Middle Tennessee, and in 2024 he became the first All-American first team offensive lineman for Georgia Tech since Shaq Mason in, I believe, 2014 or 2015. And then he doubled up in 2025 and repeated as a first team All-American again for Georgia Tech back-to-back years. So one of the rare guys who gets the personal accolades on Georgia Tech's offensive line. And I believe you're right about the ACC. They got like an award as an offensive line for being one of the best in the conference. So I wouldn't mind Rutledge. I had him, eyed more as like a day 3 pick, or early round 4 type of guy. But if you're saying, round 3, I feel like that's a pretty good range for somebody who I feel like could give you potentially starting guard upside, but also somebody who might have that versatility to bump into center. And if you're looking at the Jets specifically, John Simpson, we don't know about. AVT, we don't know about. Truthfully, I'd like to bring in some competition for Josh Myers. So if that would be a Keylan Rutledge and Josh Myers center competition, and we re-sign an AVT to play left guard, now you have a rookie. If he wins the battle, he's going up next to 2 veterans in AVT and Joe Tittman. So I would really like that if that was Rutledge projection.
Yeah, listen, I think the Senior Bowl is always synonymous for having guys rotate around.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure we'll see him line up at right guard, left guard, and I hope we see him get some center snaps, because I think that's where he'll, that physicality and that strength that he gets, from his lower half.
Mm-hmm.
And really, really helps him with his blocking production. I think that would really bode well as a center. Now, you can't just put a big guy that doesn't move as well as center. Like, he's got to be smart. He's got to,
Mm-hmm.
he's got to understand. He's got to have some sort of resilience. He's got to be able to understand what he's seeing and make the calls and all that stuff. So center is a hard position, but Keylan Rutledge has seen a lot of football over his times at 2 different schools. I'm sure that he can probably I'm sure he can adapt pretty well, and I'm sure it's something that people are going to ask him to see. I have him right up there, like I said, 3rd round. He's right smack dab in the middle of Pat Coogan and DJ Campbell for me.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Pat Coogan from Indiana. Yep.
Yeah, the center from Indiana, and DJ Campbell, the guard from Texas. Like, those 3 guys have 3 true 3rd round grades for me.
Nice.
Yeah.
So a double up here. Ricky, once again, he's asking about Terrence Carter. We already talked about Tanner Koziel. So Terrence Carter is the first tight end, but then Boss Girl says, wouldn't Eli Stowers from Vanderbilt be another tight end for straight up receiving skills? So what do you have on both those tight ends, Carter and Stowers?
Carter I didn't watch.
Okay.
So Let me see if I have him
I
here.
wonder if Carter is from Florida State, which is Ricky's favorite alma mater. Maybe he didn't go to school there. No, he's a Texas Tech tight end.
You know what then? I have grades. I watched full, like I eval 24 tight ends, and Carter was not one of them. So I can't really speak to him.
Yep, that's completely fine.
Yeah, I don't get that anyone. Now Eli Stowers is interesting too, right? He's small. He's going to be really small. He's going to be 6'2". He's listed at 6'3", 240. I'd be surprised if he's not more like 6'2", 235 or 225, 230.
Okay.
And he's bounced around. Again, he was a former, I think he was started as a quarterback at A&M before he transferred to New Mexico, before he ended up in Vanderbilt. Wow. And, he's definitely a freaky athlete. He's explosive. He's twitched up. He's got legit speed. He's got legit speed, and it helps him create separation. And he's got yak skills, for a guy like that. Listen, he's just not going to be everyone's cup of tea. Like, not everyone loves the tight ends that are that light in the pants, right? Yeah. And he's not going to really offer much in the blocking game. So he's primarily a bigger wide receiver. And he doesn't run, although he's an explosive, twitchy athlete, it doesn't always shine in his play. He doesn't run routes, he doesn't run crisp routes and stuff like that. He's more like, hey, let me just toast this guy right here. Let me get to where I'm going, get the ball in my hand, and I'll make something happen.
Absolutely. So Boss Girl doubles up and she says, Dom, if we go edge with our first pick and need that 3-down havoc creator, run defending dude, would you prefer Bain or Bailey? Do you think Reese could be that guy at edge or linebacker too? Who would you take?
Oh man, we've gone from Dante Moore and Fernando Mendoza conversation to talking about these three. So I rate them, Boss Girl. I have Arvell Reese as my number 3 overall prospect in the class. I have Ruben Bain at 5 and David Bailey at 7. So they're literally all right there. And I think all of them you can make a fair argument for, and I think all of them have concerns. I think I would take Arvell Reese. And first off, they're all freaks. They're all freaks. They're all freaks of nature in their own way. But I think Arvell Reese has a level or a tier that's completely, his ceiling can get completely higher than the other two, right? I think his potential, if it's reached, is multiple all-pro, talking about one of the best defenders in the league type of potential. Whereas I see David Bailey as his ceiling could be really good, and I see Bain as his ceiling could be an absolute shit kicker. But I don't know if they have the level that Reese plays. If Reese puts on some weight, and I think he can, I have him listed with the edge rushers. I don't know. He's not going to be, he'll never be your typical 4-3 hand in the dirt type of defensive end. He's probably going to do most of his damage, from a 2-point stance. Sometimes maybe, in certain formations or packages, split out in wide 9 so he can, run the loop, run the hoop. But he's strong as a bull, man. He's strong as a bull. I think he plays the run really good. I love the versatility that he offers him. I don't know how Aaron Glenn's going to use him. I don't know who our defensive coordinator is going to be. But if I had to choose between the three, I think I would choose Arvell Reese. But that is not to say that I don't like Bain and Bailey. Bailey's explosiveness in his first step, dude. Dylan, I don't know if you watched it yet, but it's just like, holy shit. It's like nothing you ever seen. Like the guy, when you talk about somebody that's shot out of a cannon, he's shot out of a cannon. I think he's a little light in his lower half. So I really questioned how he'll translate on early downs against the run. He does most of his work in college against the run by being able to beat his guy to a spot or shoot a gap or something like that. Not a lot of stacking and shedding and setting edges in in his day and age.
When I saw him on the list, I was so surprised that he was going to go down to Mobile because he's already getting talked about as a possible number 2 overall pick. So he's one of those guys that I feel like is going to be okay, I'm going to show up the first day, absolutely kill it in one-on-ones, and then you'll see me in street clothes on Wednesday and Thursday. But that's all fine and good. As long as we get one day of David Bailey at the Senior Bowl, I'll be really
happy. For those who are excited to watch him play on Saturday, don't rest your laurels on it.
He's not playing in the game.
But I'll talk about Bane real quick, and then we'll go on to the next question. Bane might end up being the best out of all of them. But he's a different type of edge. The power profile that he plays with, and the size and the strength that he has. He's every bit of 275.
Yes, they have no weight listed for him online. It's hard to find a true definitive weight for Ruben Bain online. Anywhere says between 265, 280. Some even say north of 280. I'm like, what is this guy?
Yeah. So the thing with him, and I know you're going to hear it so much, and I think we're going to read into it a little too much, is that he's got shorter arms.
Mm-hmm.
But he's just powerful, man. Yeah. And I love his hand fighting. And he's able to, he's still able to get at the passer, even with those shorter arms. I think in the pros, which is not a bad thing. I think he's a really, really good early down run defender on the edge, but I think as you get later in the series, like second down and third down, I think he's going to have to reduce down and do his rushing from the inside to be most effective. And I'm not comping the player, but I'm comping the skill set to JFM. You know what I mean? Where he was your strong side edge early downs, and then passing downs, he'd rush from the inside next to Quinnen. Like I could see Ruben Bain doing that. I think he'd do a phenomenal job. If you put, him and Briggs inside and passing downs, I think you got something to work with right there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm totally with you. He could play somewhat of a tweener role. My question to you, before we fully dive into the Senior Bowl defensive players, Ruben Bain specifically, I'm going into the edge rushers starting this weekend with Bain, Reese, Bailey, and Keldrick Falk as my top 4 to watch right now. Are there reps on film for Ruben Bain specifically that he loses because of length? Because I feel like when I've watched the cut-ups of him just before doing the full deep dive study of every, 4 or 5 games of him, I don't see him lose because of length. So yes, he has the short arms based on some teams' thresholds, but do you ever see him losing a ton because of that length?
No, I don't think you see it too much on film. You see him get neutralized at times, which is fine. And I don't even know if you can, if I'm blaming that on length. Sometimes a defensive end and a tackle are just going to work themselves into a stalemate. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But I think it's safe to assume when you get into the pros, I would say the majority, it's not everyone, but the majority of NFL tackles are going to have 34 plus inch arms, right? And he's going to be under 31. So
that's a big difference.
That's a big difference. You know what I mean? That's a big difference.
Absolutely. All right. We have Leany gifting 1 membership in the chat. I really appreciate you, nice. Leany. Thank you so much. And last question here. We can rapid fire through a couple of these names. You don't have to go into too much depth. Ricky says some hidden day 3 gems. I'm sure a lot of these Senior Bowl guys end up becoming day 3 gems because of what they're able to do during this week. So just quick fire, maybe 2 or 3 guys. One
I gave you one in on the offensive side in Ted Hurst, the Georgia State wide receiver. Let's see on the defensive side. You know who I like? Well, that's not really day 3. Yeah, I mean, maybe this is pushing the boundaries of day 3. I actually have him as a 3rd round grade. I don't know if he'll go in the 3rd round. I think he'll probably be more of a day 3 guy. But Kamari Ramsey, the safety out of USC, I think he's like grossly underrated. I have a feeling he's going to be typecasted as kind of a box guy, which is fine. That and those guys tend to go a little bit later. Like you think of all the safeties in the past couple years that we've got to watch, whether in Mobile or just wherever, right? all these guys that we talked about, all these shit kickers, the kid from, who's at the Saints now, who was out of Virginia last year, Malik Mustafa in San Francisco. Like, these are guys that I think where Kamara Ramsey is kind of, kind of even tiered, even keel with them as prospects. And those guys were all third round guys, I'm sorry, day 3 guys. I think Kamara Ramsey is going to fall in that, in that area. He's a good fluid athlete. I think he's got really, really good short area burst. I don't, like I said, I love the way he tackles. I love the way he tackles in space. He keeps everything square. All that stuff. He's not afraid to run the alley. Like, he gets his nose dirty. I think he can operate really good from the edge. If you put him in like a Wink Martindale hint, like situation where you have lightning blitzes and stuff like that, you ask your safety to affect the pocket. I think he will do really, really good like that. And this guy was a 2-time captain. He was captain at UCLA and a captain at USC. So to me, it shows that, he's kind of got it up here.
Yeah.
I don't know how much foot speed he's got, and I don't know how loose his hips are. So I'm not sure if you'll ever see him playing single high, and those guys usually don't, if you're not super versatile in the NFL, you're probably not going to go on days 1 or 2. But I think Kamara Ramsey can come in and really, really play the game.
Yeah, that's completely fair. I believe PFF had him in the second round of their big board. I believe in like the 40 to 55-ish range.
Wow.
And I know a lot of times it was like a second round. Like, you're debating between him and AJ Halsey. I agree. I would say he's probably closer to a third round grade, which is still top 100. That's a premium, selection if he is a top 3 round pick. But yeah, I think the versatility is what is going to hold him back, because he is more of like that box type. He's going to play, more physical. He's not going to have that range sideline to sideline, especially in single high, like you said.
Yep.
With that, we are back with Dom C talking about the defensive side of the Senior Bowl roster. Dom, give us some of your top positions on the defensive side this year. Tons of needs for the Jets, right? We're in the middle of a DC interview process, a lot of different trees that we're trying to take some assistant coaches from. The Fangio tree with Matt Arujo from the Dolphins. We have the Jim Schwartz tree with Ephraim Banda from the Cleveland Browns. And we also have Durante Jones from the Brian Flores tree. So a lot of different ways to go with this defense right now. But what are your top 3 positions heading down into Mobile?
I think my top positions in Mobile, I think for me, the linebacker, the safety room is probably they're probably number 2. I think the edge room is probably number 3, the safety room number 2, and the cornerbacks that are going to be down there for me are number 1. They're all like, there's talent up and down all 3 of those positional groups. Obviously you have some high-end talent. If David Bailey from Texas Tech, if TJ Parker from Clemson, if they stay the whole week, Akeem Messador from Miami, the edge rusher opposite Ruben Bain. Again, he's playing Monday. I wouldn't bank on seeing him,
Right.
If we're honest. I would love to, because I would love to see him, and that, that length and that size that he has go wild down there during the 1v1s. But you got Gabe Jackas from Illinois, who I think is another guy who's got, some true hand in the dirt, pass rush abilities. There's some bigger guys. Max Llewellyn, who's who I think is going to be a real force as a DPR early on from Iowa. He's 6'5", 260. And man, can that guy get at the passer? He can get at the passer, and he can do it in a bevy of different ways. So the edge group I like a lot. The safeties we talked about, some of my favorite players in the class are going to be down in Mobile. EMW, Emmanuel McNeil Warren, who is quickly becoming a fan favorite of everyone, of draft scouts, small and big alike. I see him getting touted from everywhere. like we talked about, Kamara Ramsey's going to be down there. I think he's a different type of safety. Jacoby Thomas, let's see if he makes it from Miami. Again, another kind of big box safety that, could possibly put on a little bit of weight and make that transfer into the linebacker room. I think he's got that, I think his body, he's got that body type. So I would love to see what they do with him down in Mobile. AJ Hall, you talked about AJ Halsey. You talked about, or maybe you talked about Genesis Smith from Arizona, who's another really long, really lanky split safety guy. He's very versatile. I love the way he can flip and run with defenders. I think he's gonna, he's going to redefine what, or not redefine, but put like that old school, free safety back on the map. I think that's what you're getting in Smith. So the safety room's good, but the corners are where it's at for me, man. Two of my favorite guys in this class that nobody talks about, Colton Hood from Tennessee and Julian Neal from Arkansas. When you talk about underrated, for me, Hood's the 17th rated player in the class.
Wow.
Julian Neal's the 24th rated player in the class. And they epitomize what I think the Jets could use and what not could use, but would be dominant in that kind of situation. You talk about Julian Neal might be the best press man cover corner in the entire draft class. He's that good. 6'2", 210. He's long. He's long. He's got ridiculous skills. Sticky as all hell too. I love it. He's got ball skills. He turns his head real well. He's not afraid to put his head in there, nose in there, and get dirty either. But he is just like that. If Jarvis Brownlee had, another 6 inches and a lot less penalties, like that kind of mindset, that's what you're getting in Julian Neal from Arkansas.
Wow, you can't argue with that.
No.
You're certainly selling me on him.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite studies of all. And then Colton Hood from Tennessee, he's a little bit more versatile. Like I said, I think he's a really he's up there for one of the best man cover corners in the draft. Everyone hypes up Jamal McCoy from Tennessee.
Yep.
Who is probably would have been a top 5 player if he didn't miss all last season with the torn ACL. But Colton Hood came in, transferred from Colorado and came in and really took over that role of shutdown corner there in Tennessee. He's a super, super fluid athlete. He's got range. He's so sticky in man coverage. I love the way he sinks and stays in that back hip. Does a really, really good job getting his head around on balls, making plays, breaking stuff up. Can click and close from depth when he's asked to. Sometimes he gets beat, like, the recovery speed might not be all there. He's not the biggest guy at 5'11", 190. I think that can play outside, but like he does get, the power releases sometimes get him good. Those big, strong, physical type receivers can sometimes get up on him really, really quick, really easy. So I think there's some more strength and some more time in the weight room that has to come about. But they said the same things about JC Horn. JC Horn's going to be, JC Horn's going to have to stay in the slot because he's just not strong enough. Nah, JC Horn's pretty damn good. Right. And I think Colton Hood is like a clone of JC Horn. If I had to comp him, that's exactly who I'd comp him to.
Wow.
And Julian Neal, I'd comp to Cromartie. Yeah, he's a Cromartie.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great one.
He is that type of press man corner.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the mold that I think the Jets are they're trying to overhaul their cornerback position, right? They got rid of Michael Carter for Jarvis Brownlee. They got rid of Sauce, and they have AZ Thomas right now, and then they also have Brandon Stevens on the opposite side. So you can tell that they are prioritizing length and physicality at the cornerback position. I want to circle back to some of the safeties real quick.
Yeah, sure.
I know Bud Clark gets a lot of buzz. What can you tell me about the TCU safety, Bud Clark?
Well, we'll see him. So Bud Clark's one of those guys, man. I think I've scouted Bud Clark and Rod Moore every year that I've planned on going down the Senior Bowl, which seems like it's been an eternity. They've been in college forever. So Bud Clark is an interesting one. He's a little undersized, right? At about 180 pounds, 185 pounds. I think that he's probably, and he's one of the last COVID guys that are still playing. Yeah. So he's an older prospect, obviously. He's going to be 25 by the time the draft goes off. He's had a little bit of an injury history. So he doesn't have a lot of good things going for you. But he's like the Slim Reaper, man. Like he's kind of like that defensive chess piece where you can line him up anywhere. You can ask him to play single high. He's played a lot of slot. I actually think he'll probably be more of a slot corner, or, and a nickel, or a big nickel kind of safety, third safety, slot corner type. I think he does a good job. He's got zone eyes, so he understands, again, when I talk about good in zone coverage, I'm talking about understanding your awareness, having good awareness, being able to pass things off along into the zone, keeping your eyes, where they need to be. And if it's on the quarterback, being able to click and close and make plays on the ball. And I think he can do all that stuff. He's patient. He's calm. He's just an average athlete. He's an older guy, a little bit undersized and an average athlete. Very similar. Their play styles might not be as similar, but when you think about undersized and average athlete, like think Jets, think Malachi Moore, right?
Yeah, that's what I was picturing.
Yeah, he's able to play in the league, right? And he might be a little bit more physical than Bud Clark, but I think Bud Clark might be a little bit more coverage. Be a little bit better of a coverage kind of safety, so on and so forth. So yeah, that's what I was saying. Bud Clark, like I said, I don't think you put the fact that he's undersized and the fact that he's going to be 25 years old. You're not looking at anything before a fifth or sixth round pick, if that. To be honest with you, right. But he's a guy that I think teams are going to like because of his versatility. Like I said, he's lined up all over the place in the defense.
Now, staying with the DBs, the final person I want to get your notes on, as somebody who lives in South Carolina, we've been mocked Brandon Cisse or Sis from South Carolina. Cisse. Yes. We've been mocked to him in the first round. I wasn't necessarily as impressed with him specifically, but somebody who caught my eye in that secondary was Jalen Kilgore. So what do you have on the Gamecock there?
So Kilgore's a recent new addition, if I'm not mistaken, to the Senior Bowl. Like yes. I know that he's going, but he wasn't. And I'm looking back at my notes, and I don't have him flagged in my as a Senior Bowl attendee. Although I did know that he was going, so I figured that he was probably one of these, one of the more recent addition. Again, he is. He's a big boy, dude. 6'1", 6'2". He's going to be 215 pounds. I'm surprised he might actually be. I don't know if he was on Feldman's freak list, but he should be. Because you watch his explosiveness and his athleticism. Like he jumps. He looks like he can. His athleticism is at an elite level. As a matter of fact, notes in here say that he was a 2-time state champion in the long jump, and that shows that shows somebody's athleticism. He can his football game. Again, he's a converted wide receiver, so I love those guys that play on the defensive side when they're converted wide receivers, because they know how wide receivers are trying to set them up, or the guys on the offensive side are trying to set them up, and they can usually understand route concepts and all that as well. So, you watch it with Kilgore, and you watch his ability to jump routes and make plays. I love that. 5 interceptions last year. Super active in run support and a fiery competitor. Although he's got to learn how to tackle a little better. He's more. I love those Spitfire missiles that get shot out of cannons, but he's got a wrap. That's the one thing. Like 6'1", at 6'2", 215 pounds. Again, and with the athleticism that he has, like you put him in the right defense, you give him the Robert Saleh, and you're looking at Mike Backer. You know,
wow.
I think he turns into, I think he puts on another 15, 20 pounds, and you're looking at a Mike Backer. Now, again, I'm not saying he's never played backer, you know, but I think that's the type of athlete that he is and that he can be. Like he's really good, big motor, fiery competitor. If he can learn how to tackle a little bit better, especially in space, you know, I think that, you know, you're really cooking. You're really cooking with gas here. Got to get a little, you know, you know, a little bit bigger if he's going to play more down in the box or in that, you know, in that hybrid role, you know, that joker backer. He's got to get a little bigger, and he's definitely got to tackle a little better in space. But man, I'm surprised he came out, to be honest with you. Like he just turned 21. Mm-hmm. He's a true junior. True juniors just don't come out anymore. So I was pleasantly surprised to see him enter the draft. I have a 3rd round grade on him. And I think that's probably where he'll land. Like, you know, if he went in the 60s, late 2nd, I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay. Yeah, that's where I was kind of aiming with that pick. I don't know if he's necessarily a Jet specific type of guy, but being in South Carolina, now that I'm the resident here, I have to at least, you know, keep up on the Gamecocks. So real quick, last prospect at the cornerback position, Will Lee the third. We're also being asked in the chat. Yes. What do you have on Will Lee the third?
Another guy fit in the mold of Aaron Glenn, right? 6'1", long, 195 pounds. I did a long form write up on him at Jets X Factor. Shameless plug, not really plugging, but you know, there's some real good press man skills in Will Lee. He's just a late bloomer. You know, I mean, he played. I think he played sparingly as a freshman and sophomore, if I'm not mistaken. Played sparingly. Long. I like the way he's quick with his feet. I love the way he gets up and he's physical with his receivers. It's a little grabby, you know, definitely a little slender, and you know, definitely out physicaled, or you know, he's out strength, if you will, at times. But you know, I think that, you know, the way that he can, you know, flip and run and stay in the back hip of those receivers. He's got long arms. He's got big strong hands. I think he's a really like ideal premier press cover corner. Not sure if he's going to be much more than like a role player early on. You know, I put it this way. I don't think he's of the level. For me, he's not of the level of as Uriah Thomas was coming out of FSU. You know, he's not of up that level. He's better than a Quantez Stiggers or Brandon Eccles. So, you know, if he went late round 3, early round 4, I wouldn't be surprised. Probably looking at a special teams role early on as a developmental corner. Probably not a guy you're looking to start right away.
All right, that's going to do it. Dom, let us know where we can find all your work. I know you do your own YouTube as well as Jets X Factor, so plug away before we get out of here.
Yeah, all my written work, guys, and articles, long form evals are all at Jets X Factor, www.jetsxfactor.com. If you're a Jets fan, it's a awesome place to get your information. There's a ton of great knowledge that comes through Jet X Factor. You know, not only myself, pat myself on the back, I'm kidding. But you know, you got the kid there, you got Joe Blue, you got Nania, you got Sabo, Nick Faria with the instant stuff, man. There's a lot of good intel and a lot of good people that contribute to Jets X Factor. On top of that, Project Prospect with Dom C, the Draft Dodgers is a weekly podcast that we put out. I got some great guests coming up. You guys will really like in the draft world. That's more of not so Jets centric, but much more NFL draft centric. So please check that out, man.
Yep, I linked all of Dom C's articles in the live chat. I will also link that in the description below. For Dom C, I am DT signing out saying, let's go Jets.